Even though we saw it coming, Rafael Nadal is another step closer to breaking Roger Federer's major record. But let's talk about his winning streak, starting from his notable debut was in 2003. This man always knew how to make an impact. Back then, the 17-year-old entered the Wimbledon draw and ended up scoring 2 wins. And with that, he became the youngest player in the third round. Do you know when the last time someone did that? Well, probably back in the 80s when some of our favorites made the cut, like Boris Becker and Mats Wilander. And fast forward to 19 years later, Nadal literally owns 22 major titles and about 300 victories. In fact, he's still chasing trophies at 36. I mean, what else do you expect from the guy? And while we're at it, let's talk about his amazing winning start at the Australian Open. Yup, I'm talking about the same one when he beat the young Briton Jake Draper in about 3 hours and 41 minutes. And with that, Nadal paved the road to a major victory for the 21st straight year.
Game, set, match, Nadal. 7-5.
Can you believe it? 2 freaking decades! If anything, he even left Andre Agassi at 20, and now he's about 1 year behind from breaking Roger Federer's record. But everything hasn't always been great. There was one thing the player continued to struggle with. His injury since the 2022 Wimbledon wasn't easy to recover from. In fact, Rafa came to Melbourne with about 7 losses in the last 11 matches, and due to his injury, he even ended up dropping both encounters at the United Cup.
When Cressy thought he had the point won, Nadal has come up with a moment of magic.
Having said that, the player dug deep in the opening 3 sets against the fellow left-hander. That was all until he left him behind in the 4th. Here are the numbers. Rafa hits 41 winners, 46 unforced errors, and even saved 7 out of 11 break chances. To top it off, the Spaniard even broke the Briton about 6 times out of the 12 opportunities he had. All of that just to make it to the top and jump into the next round. And while we're at it, let's just say Draper definitely had the advantage in the rallies right up to 4 strokes, and that kept them in touch with the first 3 sets. But Nadal couldn't step back for too long because eventually he decided to take charge in further extended exchanges. In fact, as expected, he brought the win home and matched Ivan Lendl's 1,068 ATP wins. As for the returners, let's just say they hardly made an impression. In fact, they barely managed to win a single point in the opening 7 games. On the other hand, Rafa was already in the lead with 4-3 just after about 25 minutes of the game. But that wasn't enough, clearly, because the player kept the pressure on his rival right up until the last push on the return in the 12th game. If anything, he pretty much took advantage of his rival's mistake and ended up creating a set point only to seize it with a forehand cross-court answer. But can you believe he wrapped it up with 7-8 in 54 minutes? I can't either. But that's the kind of game you expect from someone like Rafael Nadal. Moving on to the second set, Rafa had to catch up because Jack took charge in the second set. Let's just say he found the rhythm behind the return. Sure, Rafa pretty much snatched game points right at the start of the set, but they pretty much got broken right after Jack's volley winner. Moving on, Nadal struggled quite a bit as he faced more breakpoints at 0-4. In fact, he even saved them to somehow reduce the deficit. On the other hand, the Briton stayed pretty calm and even held at 15 in Game 8 to wrap up what I'd like to say, quite the impressive set. And right after an hour and 47 minutes of keeping the audience glued to the edge of their seats, he finally managed to level the overall score. But the third set changed everything. Nadal made a comeback and broke Draper at 2-1. And let's just say, the youngster's double fault led to this today. If anything, Jack seemed to struggle physically, but eventually broke back in Game 7, all thanks to Nadal's loose forehand. And just at about 5-4, the Spaniard grabbed a crucial break to to finally wrap up the set and open another 2 to a single advantage. Eventually, they traded breaks right before the 4th set. As for the Spaniard, he pretty much delivered another 3 straight return games to forge a 5-1 lead. In fact, he even saved break points in Game 7, and as expected, he wrapped the game with a victory after his rival's forehand error. But is Rafael's victory all that matters? Because another player isn't doing so well. And that's Nick Kyrgios, who suffered an Australian Open heartbreak. While Rafa was out there launching his Australian Open title defense with a 4-set victory, Nick Kyrgios called it quits because of his injury without hitting a ball. As for the women's draw, let's just say Iga Swiatek had quite the examination. On the other hand, Jessica Pegula and teenage prodigy Coco Gauff were pretty emphatic winners. In fact, digging in deeper, the top seed recovered from a second-set wobble. And not only that, but there was also a pretty crazy incident when a ball boy literally ended up taking his racket. All of that to defeat the 38th ranked Briton at Rod Laver Arena. As for Nadal, he's facing American Mackenzie McDonald in round 2. And right after claiming the victory over Draper, he seemed pretty excited about the new beginning. After all, the last few months were pretty difficult for the player. Now let's rewind to when Kyrgios called a press conference. Let's just say it was pretty abrupt. On the other hand, Nadal was on court when Nick made it pretty clear that he's officially out of the tournament. Sure, the Wimbledon finalist was pretty devastated. If anything, he had a couple of great tournaments here. He won the doubles last year, and honestly, we all thought he was an outside bet to grab the maiden Grand Slam victory. At the same time, he's just exhausted. Everything's been pretty brutal. And let's not forget the 9-time Australian Open champion Novak Djokovic, who was pretty much detained and deported right before last year's tournament. Why? Well, he refused to get vaccinated for COVID-19, but now he's back to begin his title assault.
Breathtakingly good.
A couple of other winners are some of your favorites. There was 3rd seed Stefanos Tsitsipas and even 6th seed Felix Auger-Aliassime. But coming back to Swiatek, let's just say she was far from her actual best. And I'm talking about the match against Julie Niemmer. But then again, she definitely got the job done, and I guess that's what really matters, right? Well, Swiatek found the competition harder than we thought. Someone like Julie can make the first round much more tricky. Sure, the first round's pretty tricky, but the right opponent can really turn the game around. And even though she landed only 49% of her first serves, she was pretty happy she managed to get through the match. In fact, she wanted to truly focus on herself throughout, because it's definitely not as easy to defeat someone like Julie, especially after all that pressure. But here's my question for you. How excited are you as Rafael Nadal takes his winning streak one step further toward Roger Federer's major record? Let me know in the comments below.